cellular organization, cell function and intercellular connection। चैप्टर नंबर 4 आज पढ़ेंगे क्योंकि बाकी सब आई थिंक मैंने पढ़ा था और बाकी जो कुछ भी आई थिंक कंप्लीट हो गया था। सो चैप्टर नंबर 4 सेलुलर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, सेल फंक्शन एंड इंटरसेलुलर कनेक्शन। Describe the structure and function of a mammalian cell. The cell is the structural and functional unit of a tissue and organ of the body. There are about 30 से लेकर के 37 trillion cell in a human being. They provide structural support to the body, utilize nutrient to provide energy, contains the body heredity code and perform many special function. Organization and function of the cell. A cell consists of three fundamental component: cell membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus. Cell membrane. Cell membrane is the protective sheath of the cell. It exchanges material between the cytoplasm and the external environment, facilitate interaction between the cell and helps in anchoring the cells to each other. Structure of the cell membrane. The cell membrane is basically a double layer of a lipid molecule having a thickness of 7 to 10 nanometer, into which are inserted or attached various protein molecules. Lipid constitute about 42% of the dry weight of the membrane. Protein constitute about 55% and carbohydrate constitute 3%. चारिपट fluid mosaic model of the membrane. Though many models of a cell membrane have been described in the past, the widely accepted one is fluid mosaic model described by Singer and Nicholson in 1972. Now, special feature of this model are as follows. Cell membrane consists of a double layer of phospholipid that contain protein molecule. Cell membrane consists double layer of phospholipid that contain protein molecule. The model is called fluid mosaic model as the membrane lipid are present in fluid form that allows the flexibility of the membrane without disturbing the structural integrity. The membrane protein are loosely attached and float in the fluid phospholipid bilayer. Rapid and random redistribution of integral protein occur in the membrane. Also, phospholipid undergoes rapid redistribution in the plane of the membrane. This type of diffusion with the plane of the membrane is called translational diffusion. This occurs rapidly for phospholipid, which can move several micrometer per second. Factors contributing to fluidity of the membrane. The fluidity of the membrane is mainly dependent on the temperature and lipid composition of the membrane. The fluidity factor contributing to fluidity of the membrane. The fluidity of the membrane is mainly dependent on the temperature and lipid composition of the membrane. Effect of temperature. When temperature increases, the hydrophobic side chain undergoes a transition from its ordered gel or crystalline state to a more disordered liquid state. Lipid composition of a membrane. Fluidity is largely dependent on lipid composition. Phospholipid in membrane generally contain at least one unsaturated fatty acid with cis bond. With rise in temperature, the unsaturated bond among fatty acid side chain lose their orderly or stiff arrangement. In addition to this, their cis configuration decreases its compactness and become more disordered. Thus, rise in temperature increases fluidity. Similarly, when length of a fatty acid molecule increases, it increases the chance of intermolecular interaction and adds to the rigidity. Thus, with increase in degree of unsaturation, increase in fatty acid length, and increase in phospholipid content containing unsaturated fatty acid in cis configuration, membrane fluidity increases. Role of cholesterol. Though cholesterol profoundly influences membrane fluidity, it behaves differently at a different temperature. It is rather a bulky molecule placed among phospholipid bilayer at increased temperature. With rise in temperature, phospholipid molecule gain kinetic energy and start moving apart. This leads to the membrane to start melting, but the presence of a bulky cholesterol molecule pulls the fatty acid together, thus decreasing fluidity. Thus, at increased temperature, cholesterol decreases fluidity of the membrane. At a decreased temperature, when temperature goes down, fatty acid of phospholipid lose energy and come very close to each other. This leads to decreased intermolecular interaction, which makes the membrane more compact. but the presence of same bulky cholesterol prevent this close interaction, thus increasing fluidity. Thus, at a decreased temperature, cholesterol increases membrane fluidity. Thus, cholesterol behaves like a buffer and tries to oppose the effect of a fatty acid on fluidity, thereby tries to preserve the membrane integrity within the range. Hence, cholesterol phospholipid ratio is the important factor for membrane integrity, which is turn which in turn is linked to various function in the cell. Lipid bilayer. The major lipid in the cell membrane are phospholipid, glycolipid, and cholesterol. The phospholipid and phosphatidyl choline, sphingomyelin, phosphatidylserine, phosphatidyl ethanolamine. Glycolipid are generally found in the outer layer. Lipids are amphipathic. Amphi means both molecules are there. Head or polar region is hydrophilic, and tail or nonpolar region is hydrophobic. The globular or the head end contain phosphate or hydroxyl moieties that are positively charged and soluble in water. The tail end contains two chains of fatty acid that are insoluble in water. The arrangement is such that the hydrophobic tail end are directed towards the center, and hydrophilic head is located to the periphery of the membrane as depicted in the figure 4.2. Okay. Acha. The arrangement is such that the hydrophobic tail ends are directed towards the center, and the hydrophilic head is located to the periphery of the membrane. Thus, hydrophilic head of a lipid molecule faces the aqueous phase from both inside and outside of the cell. Similar bilayer A similar bilayer arrangement is found in bile salt where they form spherical micelles. Cholesterol. Cholesterol is incorporated into the hydrophobic region of the membrane and serve to reinforce the lipid permeability barrier. The individual phospholipid molecule can move freely within the specific layer but not from one layer to another. Hence, the cell membrane is said to be fluid in nature. Application box 4.1. Okay. Determinant of the fluidity of the membrane. The fluidity of the membrane depends on the composition of a lipid and a degree of unsaturation. The major determinant is its cholesterol phospholipid ratio. Cholesterol at decreased temperature increases the fluidity of the membrane. Function of a lipid bilayer. The main function of a lipid bilayer of a cell membrane is to create a permeability barrier between the interstitial fluid and the cytoplasm. Okay. The permeability of a substance depends on whether it is lipid soluble or water soluble. Lipid soluble substance like oxygen and alcohol can pass easily through the cell membrane. Water soluble substance like urea, glucose cannot pass easily. Thus, lipid bilayer makes the membrane semi-permeable. Membrane protein. Membrane protein are of two types, integral protein and peripheral protein. Integral protein क्या होता है? Some membrane protein that spans entire thickness of the membrane are known as integral protein. They are also called transmembrane protein. Some integral protein penetrate only a portion of the membrane so that they are exposed either to the external environment of the cell जो कि interstitial fluid होता है or to the cytoplasmic surface of the membrane or intracellular fluid. Some membrane protein also move laterally within the membrane. Example हो गया membrane receptor can move to site of endocytosis. The function of a integral protein. The function of an integral membrane protein are as follows. Number one, serve as a channel protein. Channels or pores are integral protein through which water soluble substance like आपका glucose, electrolyte can diffuse across the cell membrane. Act as a carrier. Carrier protein transport substance through cell membrane by facilitated diffusion. For example, the transport of a glucose through glucose transporter. Serve as ion pump. Membrane protein serve as pump for active transport of ion across the membrane. For example, sodium potassium ATPase that pump potassium into the cell and sodium out of the cell against their concentration gradient. Serve as a receptor and enzyme protein. Integral protein that are present towards the outer half of the membrane usually serve as a receptor, and usually those on the inner halves serve as enzyme. Membrane G protein belongs to the category of the protein. Antigenic function. Complex membrane proteins such as glycoprotein act as antigen on the surface of the cell. For example, blood group antigen in the membrane of red cell. Then आपका आ जाता है पेरिफेरल प्रोटीन. मेम्ब्रेन प्रोटीन दो टाइप के होते हैं, इंटेग्रल प्रोटीन, पेरिफेरल प्रोटीन. इंटेग्रल प्रोटीन खत्म हुआ, पेरिफेरल प्रोटीन. Some protein molecule are inserted lightly in the outer or inner border of the membrane or are just bound to the surface of the membrane. Such protein are called peripheral protein. There are two types intrinsic protein, extrinsic protein. Intrinsic peripheral protein, extrinsic peripheral protein. They are present on the inner surface of the membrane, intrinsic protein. They usually serve as an enzyme or anchor protein for cytoskeleton and other microfilaments that maintain cell shape. Extrinsic protein. They are present on the outer surface of the membrane. They serve as cell adhesion molecule CAM for anchoring cell with basal lamina and with neighboring cell. They can be removed without disrupting the membrane. They can be removed without disrupting the membrane. Then membrane carbohydrate. Membrane carbohydrate. The external surface of the cell membrane is loosely covered by a carbohydrate layer known as the cell coat or glycocalyx. Function of a glycocalyx. Glycocalyx serve as a protective coat. Carbohydrate is negatively charged, therefore prevent negative particles like protein molecule to interact between cell. Some of the transmembrane glycoprotein like selectin recognize and bind with specific oligosaccharide on other cell membrane and therefore permit temporary cell to cell adhesion. Such temporary adhesion occurs between neutrophil and endothelial cell at the site of inflammation. Stronger adhesion between cell is formed by integral membrane protein such as integrin. Some carbohydrate molecule serve as receptor. Some carbohydrate molecule serve as receptor. Function of a cell membrane. Cell membrane maintain a constant and distinctive intracellular environment which is essential for functioning of organelles. For example, the intracellular fluid has lower concentration of sodium and chloride, low pH, but high concentration of potassium, organic phosphates and magnesium. हाँ, cell membrane maintains cell volume by actively transferring ions across it, especially by pumping sodium ion out of the cell. In neurons and muscle cell, it maintains a potential difference between intracellular and extracellular surface, which enables cell to respond to various stimuli. Cell membrane helps in recognizing foreign cell or antigens so that they can be destroyed by phagocytes. आज का स्टडी विद ब्लॉग्स में इतना ही। यहाँ तक देखने के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग।